guys are doing good. We've had a good week. I've had a great week, just so you guys know. This past week, I started my first week of my last semester of formal education. More fired up, so I quit spending all that money. But it's going to be a good morning. So, according to Forbes magazine, this is an official poll. Recently, actually I think it came out a couple years ago, they did a list of the top 9 toughest positions or leadership roles. Here's what they said. Number 9, a corporate CEO. Number 8, a U.S. congressperson. Number 7, editor for a daily newspaper. Number 6, a mayor. Number 5, pastor, rabbi, or other holy leader. Number 4, a football coach. So on this Saturday in fall, just keep in mind, Pastor Jerry, Nick Saban. Almost identical, except for maybe their money. I think Jerry makes a little. Maybe. Number 3, second in command of any organization. Number 2, a university president. And number 1, the toughest leadership role, according to Forbes, the stay-at-home parent. I think we all would agree, whether you are or not a stay-at-home parent, we all would agree that parenting is difficult. It's hard. It can bring so much joy and happiness to our lives, but it can also bring so much pain and misery. Some days it can feel like it gives us this joy that we just can't understand or comprehend, and then the next minute, the following minute, is sucking the soul from your body. Parenting is difficult. This morning we're going to talk about parenting. We all know that it can be frustrating and hard, but it can also be rewarding. And just so we're all on the same page, I gave the stipulation last week. I'm not Dr. Phil. I'm not by any means a parenting expert. I have little ones in my household. I was actually sharing with another local pastor that I was kind of not looking forward to this message because I know that we've got folks that are well more experienced in parenting than myself. And he was like, well, just want to remind you. You know, Dr. James Dobson, most of you know that name, the Focus on the Family parenting guru. He wrote his first book, Dare to Discipline. He only had little kids in his house. So he said, Zach, it may be fantastic. Just saying. You never know. But here's our basic assumption this morning that we're all going to start with. Kids need parenting. Yeah. Hey, that sounds obvious to think about it. And maybe you're holier than I am. Don't you get frustrated when you find yourself in that moment when your kid needs parenting? Yeah, like when you actually have to take a break from your very important schedule to parent your kids. No, here's why we don't do that. Here's why we do this. You know, parenting is frustrating, especially when it gets in the way of our life, because most of us feel inconvenienced when we have to parent. So our basic assumption is this: kids need parenting. You know, I struggle with this. I think my 4-year-old should just know the answer. I think my 4-year-old should just be good. I think my 4-year-old should just act the right way. I told you once, 3 years ago. You should get this by now. Why are we still having this conversation? And I get frustrated. And I've got to remind myself, oh yeah, he needs parenting. Maybe you struggle with this too. So to start our conversation off, 1, kids need parenting. 2, we're going to flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 6 in the Old Testament. And it's not on the screen because I didn't send it to Nate until 6 o'clock this morning. So I apologize. It's a busy week. Hey, it was my first week of my last semester of school, okay? I was doing a lot of stuff. A lot of hats, a lot of juggling. Here's what it says. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 6. And this is what the Lord tells people, specifically parents. These words that I command you today shall be on your heart. Verse 7. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. And so The law of God has just been given to God's people, and they're being told some very specific things and instructions about how to parent. And I think you could really say this, though. What we learn from this passage is that parenting is deliberate. Parenting is deliberate. Even training up children in the way of the Lord, it's when you're walking with them that you teach them diligently to your children. Talk with them when you're sitting. Tell them when you're walking, when they lie down. You see, we have to be deliberate in parenting. Parenting is not inconvenience. It's something that we should be diligent in. This verse teaches us a lot about parenting. Specifically, be deliberate. If you have kids in your house, most likely you want to be a good parent. The question is this morning, what exactly is a good parent? And how exactly can I operate in being a good parent, or a good grandparent, or a great-grandparent, or future parent? What does that look like? Because I'm not a child-rearing expert. I'm on a journey just like you. This morning we're going to talk about with what I would say all kids struggle with the most. You could really boil down every aspect of parenting and what we're trying to accomplish and what God wants to accomplish, because all of our kids and your grandkids all struggle with this. Who is the boss? It all boils down to that. Who's the boss? Because my infant, well, I guess he's not an infant. Is a one an infant? Yeah, no, it's close enough. He's the boss of the house. Thinks he is. He grunts and he points. And he expects when he grunts and when he points that something's going to happen. And when that something doesn't happen, he grunts louder, he points with more ferocity, and then he cries because he's the boss. My 4-year-old thinks he's the boss. Having this conversation on authority not too long ago, Josiah, God is all of our boss, and specifically, I'm your boss. And he goes, oh no, I'm my boss. Every issue in parenting boils down to this. We all want to be in charge of our own destinies. We all want to be in charge of our own lives. We all want to be in charge of our own choices. We are the boss, and this understanding of authority begins from the age of infancy. When I point, and in my mind, I should get my way. You see, this is the struggle. This is the struggle. We want to be our own authority because we're all sinners. The Apostle Paul, in a letter to the church in Corinth, wrote this. It's fascinating. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, we're going to read 14 and 15. For the love of Christ controls us, because we have concluded this, that one has died for all, therefore we have all died. And he, that is Jesus, died for all. Get this. Why did he die? That those who live might no longer live for themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. We all have a heart issue. We all struggle with authority. I love how Paul words it this way, that Jesus died that they might no longer live for themselves, because it's still going to be a struggle. It's still going to be hard. Because this authority, or this question of who is the boss, is a heart issue that has plagued us since the beginning, when sin entered reality in the universe. From that point on, even if you look at Adam and Eve, God, I don't know that you really know best. I'm going to eat this fruit. This is the central issue. So how do we think about this issue as it relates to parenting or grandparenting or helping our kids parent? How do we think about this issue when we view our sweet, innocent children? Who is the boss? You know, how we respond to authority is a matter of the heart. And what Paul teaches us in this letter to Corinth is that this heart issue is really a sin issue. And only Jesus can save us from this sin issue. Only Jesus can change our hearts. Only He can change the hearts of our children. So does that mean we say, well, there's no place for me in this? It's all by supernatural, divine, and decree. It's unless my kid professes Jesus as Lord, then they can be fixed. How does parenting work into this? And I get frustrated with Josiah until I have to remind myself he's a sinner. He's not going to act like he's a believer because he's a sinner. He is yet to understand that his sins separate him from God. He is yet to place his faith and trust in Jesus. Guess what he's going to do naturally? He's going to sin. He's going to say, no, Daddy, you don't understand. I'm the boss. This is the issue. This is the dilemma. And here's why this is important too for parents. Because when a child says no, or when a child starts to throw a fit in order to get his or her way, when a child acts like they don't hear what you just said, when they're not necessarily saying, I don't like you, I don't value you, you're a bad parent. What they're saying is, I'm a sinner and I have a heart issue. And I need something outside of myself. That's what they're really saying. They're saying, I'm the boss, I live for me, and that's because I'm a sinner and I have a heart issue. So if Jesus is the only one who can change hearts, what are we supposed to do? Luckily for us, Paul gives us some help in this, in Ephesians. So we were in Ephesians last week looking at marriage. We're going to be in Ephesians again this week. Chapter 6. Verses 1 through 4, the Apostle Paul writes this to the church at Ephesus. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you might live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. For some reason, Elizabeth feels the need to remind me of this first part of verse 4. Do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in discipline and instruction of the Lord. Kids are supposed to obey. It's a command. So from this we see that the parent has the authority. The parent, let's rephrase it. The parent should have the authority with kids. There is this, even though Josiah is saying, no, I'm the boss, I'm a sinner, I have a heart issue, at the end of the day, I'm Josiah's and Elizabeth and Asher, well, Elizabeth and I are Josiah and Asher's authority that God has given them as a gift. That's the kicker, it's a gift. See, why? Here's the question, what's the purpose of this authority? Why is this important? Verse 3, we're told this, that they may go well with you, that things might go well with you, that you might live long in the land. You see, authority is for a child's betterment and benefit. Authority is not something that the parent should abuse. Hey, you know the old picture when you watch or maybe the old black and white TV shows, and the dad gets home and the kids come with the pipe and slippers, like little slaves. That's not good authority. See, authority is for the betterment of the child. It's a gift to kids. We had this talk with our teenagers this past week, that authority is good, that you might live well and long, that it might be well with you in the land. Authority is something that should point to God's authority over us. You know, had this conversation with Josiah the other day, and he totally got it. Completely, 100%. And we're talking about why rules are important. Because, I want what's best for them. Authority is a gift. And a lot of parents fail, myself included. We had those moments where we completely fail because we let our kids be the authority. Even if we just say, I'm not even dealing with this right now, and walk away. We've, in that moment, said, you're the boss. But authority is a gift. It's a good thing. It's necessary. So how do we teach our kids to value authority? How do we teach our kids that authority is a gift? Paul again answers this question. Verse 4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in discipline and instruction of the Lord. So we're told to discipline and instruct our kids. Discipline and instruct your kids. Don't just discipline. And I think when you look at the different parenting styles out there, all of us are drawn to one or the other. You're either kind of like me and it's just all discipline all the time. Go to timeout. Get the bell. Well, why? Well, that's not important. Because I said so. And we're just discipline, discipline, discipline. Then you have those other parents, and they lean more toward the instruct, and they just want to explain everything with no discipline. You see, both of those extremes are wrong. Paul's saying, look, it's how do we teach our kids that we're the authority and that authority is good for them, pointing to a greater and good authority? We discipline and instruct at the same time. So I actually saw the benefits of this past week. A few weeks ago, we went to the skating rink as a church, and Josiah had a meltdown. So you had terrible twos, Josiah was great. Threes, okay. The past month, guys, miserable. And this was the first time I'd ever seen him act like this. Some of you witnessed it. And I was just disciplined. Discipline, discipline, discipline. And after we were disciplined, you could tell his heart was, he was still, here's the thing. When we just discipline, we just try to control the behavior and we'll let the heart run wild still. And so what happened was Josiah stopped throwing the fit, but you could look at him and tell he was still having a heart issue, big time. This past Wednesday, right before youth group, we're getting set up and meltdown occurs. And I've been confronted with this passage through the week studying it. Okay, game change. We're going to discipline. So we did. We went through all that, bad attitude, change of scenery. We go out to the picnic table and we have a really good conversation of instruction. And you know what happens? His whole demeanor changes. He comes in, he's like, Dad, I want to help you with chairs. And so we set up chairs, and it was like, oh wow, Jesus, it's like, you know what you're talking about in the Bible. Discipline and instruction. Oh, okay, light bulb moment. And it was crazy. And we've got some friends that live in the north, and they make fun of us parents in the south because they're like, look, in the south you just like, kids should be seen and not heard. And so I think sometimes we Southerners, we overly discipline when a kid is just acting like a kid. It's kind of our natural motif. And I think we all struggle to a degree with this. I'm just going to intimidate and discipline until they behave right. But if we never address the heart issue, hey, when your kid turns 18, and some of you experience this, authority doesn't mean anything. I mean, they get to college, and they're not under your roof, and we've never addressed the heart issue. Now what? See, it's both and. It's discipline and instruction. And this is when parenting is an inconvenience. Because Wednesday night, we got youth group going. I got stuff to do. Lots of stuff to do. I didn't have time to take 15 minutes to go sit on the picnic table with Josiah and instruct him. Because I'm right. Don't we all have important things to do? It can be frustrating when we have to parent. But when I talked to him and we had this conversation, exactly, authority and it's a gift, and I'm not telling you not to do something because I don't like you and I'm against you and I don't want you to have fun. Like, I want you to have the best life that you can have through Jesus. And a part of that is rules. You know, Dad, I've got rules that I have to live by that are for my good, that God gives to me. And now, are we going to have that conversation again? Absolutely. But in that moment, something happened in my little 4-year-old's heart to where he not only calmed down, but he was like, let's go set up the chairs. I'm going to help. Because God knows what He's talking about. And His Word is important, and it applies to us. And it's discipline and instruction. In the Bible, these two things go hand in hand. I was thinking about this too. We talk about how parents, our kids struggle with this. And I'm confronted with how I sometimes deal with authority now. Sometimes I act worse than my 4-year-old. And I was thinking about that. There's a verse in Hebrews that I don't like very much. Chapter 13, verse 17, the writer of Hebrews says this: obey your leaders. He's talking about spiritual leaders to this church. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who will have to give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. You know why this is written to adults and kids? Because it's hard. Submitting to an authority is difficult, and it's not fun. You know who the boss of me is? You know who I wish the boss of me is? Me. Just like my 4-year-old. Some things don't change. What changes is the fact that unlike my 4-year-old, I understand that my sins have separated me from a good and loving Father. And I trust Jesus' promises. And so I want my authority to be good and point my 4-year-old and 1-year-old to that promise as well. That, hey, we all have to submit to authority. It's for our good. This is the joy of parenting. Teaching your kid who the boss is, or who the boss should be. We asked the question earlier about what makes a good parent. So instead of giving like this definition, I'm going to give us some characteristics from what we see in specifically Ephesians 6. 1, a good parent has authority. They have authority. They don't let the kid function as if they're the boss. They don't say, I don't want to deal with this right now. Okay, you be the boss in this moment. A good parent has authority. It's not abusive, it's constructive. A good parent uses his authority for the good of the child. Again, it's not abusive, it's constructive. And 3, a good parent disciplines and instructs. A good parent does not just instruct and hope all will go well. And a good parent doesn't just discipline and try to modify the behavior. A good parent understands that all sin is a heart issue. That parenting essentially, post-fall, parenting is pointing little sinners to the hope of Jesus. And it takes discipline and instruction. So I want to encourage you this morning to do this. To take the time to parent your kids. To take the time to help your kids parent their kids. To discipline and instruct. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning. We thank you for your love and grace. We thank you for the joy that is parenting. Even though it can be frustrating, it can be difficult,